Hi, everyone. We just finished on the live session. And so now everybody in the audience here is ready to hear the presentation as well. So you're beaming live across the world, but also specifically within Kigali. And we're all looking forward to the conversation. So over to you, Bob.
Great. Well, hello and welcome to all of you, and special thanks to Keisha and AUHF for inviting Femi and Wolf and Winnie and me to participate in this discussion. This morning, we're going to be talking about the challenges and rewards of delivering a home at or near the $10,000 threshold level, which is something that gets talked about a lot and something that all of us are working on. And I just want to take a moment to state at the outset that all of us on this panel and on every panel that's here today, we all know that the housing crisis in Sub-Saharan Africa is a little bit like the climate crisis, in the sense that everyone really knows already what needs to change to address the crisis. And what's lacking, both in the climate crisis and in the housing crisis, is the political will to make that change. So in housing, what needs to change is a regulatory framework across the continent that's hostile to developers of low-cost housing, problems with land title laws and documentation, and then globally, a bias in the financial sector that prevents Sub-Saharan African individuals and governments from access to long-term financing on sustainable terms. And we all know that until those with the power to make those changes until they put in place a regulatory framework, and I'm looking at you, policymakers in Africa, and until they put in place a favorable financing framework, and I'm looking at you, African and multinational public and private financial institutions, until you do that, the rest of us working in the field are only chipping away at the problem. However, we are chipping away at it, and we have exciting things to say about it. We're going to talk about a few key issues in the field that have a meaningful impact on the possibility of delivering a $10,000 house at scale in Sub-Saharan Africa, and delivering a $10,000 house that people will be happy to live in, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not putting up showpieces to demonstrate a particular kind of technology. We're building homes, and we want people to feel like they are home and to be happy in that home and comfortable in that home and safe in that home and proud of that home. So from climate friendly design and materials to trying to bridge the gap between a potential homeowner's dream and their budget, to understanding how cultural bias can get in the way of adopting new technologies and often prevents the adoption of superior construction materials. We've got a lot to say about those things. We only have a short time in which to say it. And if Femi has joined us, there he is. Yeah, Femi's here. Good. So I'm going to ask Femi to kick us off with a brief introduction of what Family Home Funds is doing in Nigeria in this low-cost space. And then Femi's going to hand it off. We're just going to go around the panel, sort of self-moderating, introducing ourselves, and then dive into some questions and answers. If you in the audience have questions, please feel free to submit them via the chat function or whatever Q&A function is available to those of you streaming live. And with that, I am going to hand it off to you, Femi.
Yes, my name is Femi. I'm the managing director here at Family Homes Funds. The Family Homes Funds is a special purpose vehicle established by both the Treasury of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and Nigeria's Sovereign Wealth Fund, with a primary purpose for providing financing on a large scale for social housing as part of a wider social intervention program of the government. The fund is capitalized to develop 500,000 homes during its life. That's about 10 years. And in the process, provide 1.5 million jobs. The fund has been operational for 2 years with real operational activities starting in 2021, and by the end of this year, it will have about 25,000 homes under completion, construction, or completed across 9 parts of Nigeria. 83% of those homes are priced at just under $10,000, with about 30% of those homes priced at less than $5,000, which speaks to the core mandate of the fund as a social housing financing organization. The business operates 2 models. One is direct development of model estates, and it has 5 of those across the country, basically to demonstrate what is possible in terms of achieving the price bands for people on low income. That accounts for just over 4,000 homes. And the second business model is providing direct construction finance to both public and private sector developers. The business model is heavily predicated on a significant work on the supply chain, particularly the value chain in the housing construction space, but also very strategic partnership with government agencies, particularly the state government. I will stop there, Robert. Thank you. I think you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. Thank you, Robert. I'm Winnie Getao from Kwangu Kwako Limited. I start by just describing my market. In Kenya, there is a gap of more than 400,000 in terms of housing. When it comes to Nairobi, my market, we have more than 2 million people living in informal structures. When I say informal structures, it's structures that are made of metal iron sheets. Some are made of westwood. Any other material that is informal is what I'm talking about. And when I'm talking about a house, is families that live in a single room of course C12, that is for 144 square feet, or 100 square feet. A room that is actually a home for about 3 or 4 people, depending on which area you are. That is a market that I'm talking about, and that is what it calls housing in my market. So what we've done is we realized that in Kenya, fires is an almost thing. More than 10,000 units burn every year because they're made of metal sheets. It's easy to burn, there's wastewood, there's everything that is combustible. That is actually what made us start. When we started, it's because one structure of a precast concrete toilet was actually left after all the fire and more than 200 units got burnt. So for us, that was a solution in the middle of a disaster. So we decided to actually come up with a precast concrete solution for housing for that particular market. So for us, that market is rental because most of those people living in that area is the fact that they cannot actually afford to own a home, leave alone a land. So 80% or 85% of those homes are owned by landlords. So it is only through partnerships with landlords that we can actually deliver our housing. So we work together with the landlords, who are, by the way, investors, or we call them business people. We had to come up with a value proposition that is actually good for them. So long as they get and return, depending on how much return it is, then they're able to actually build an affordable, decent, and actually something that people are proud of building. So our homes range from about $2,000 off to $10,000, depending on which market. What pegs the market is actually, the return of investment as well as rental. people rent houses from about $35 to around $100, depending on where you are. We are just targeting from 35 to around 50 so far. So it has been good. So what do we make our houses for is reinforced precast concrete panels. We manufacture them to maintain the quality of product. We construct them. That is by also you combining them using fabricated metal in terms of doors and windows for security purposes. It is fast to build because it is offsite construction. So just in a matter of 3 days, we already have an up structure of a single room and it's complete. It is easy to assemble. It is like Lego pieces. That makes it possible for us to train people from the local community and also have employment. That makes our product cheaper because the labor is cheap and available. It is also affordable for the landlords. We make it cheap enough for them to actually afford them, and also we introduce them to financial partners as well. This is something landlords are very particular about. They want a house that they themselves are proud of. I want to, as Kenyans put it, I want to stop my Lexus outside my plot and know that this is something I'm not ashamed of. I'm not something that I cannot actually run away from because it's something that I provide for my people, because this is for them is an investment as well as providing a return to the community. Most of them have lived there, so they are providing for their shelters, for the community, for the neighbors. This is something they're actually providing for their neighbors, and they really like what they're doing. Wolf?
Yeah, thank you. I thought I might first give the opportunity to Robert, or
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Wolf. I had myself muted earlier. I'll just do a brief introduction of Jokomax and what we do. We are a U.S. company started by 2 former Peace Corps volunteers and a Guinean who had immigrated to the United States. In 2014, we started building homes in Guinea, Conakry, largely serving the Guinean diaspora in OECD markets. This is a population that I'm sure many of you know has a strong desire to invest in their home country. They have the means to invest in their home country. They want to have a home to return to in their home country, and for a variety of reasons, typically have a really hard time getting that job done. Using the typical process is to find a friend or family member and start sending them money, and over a period of a number of years hope to get something built. For a variety of reasons, that story often ends in tears, and I'm sure many of you have heard some of those stories. But our principal market today has been the diaspora. We do sell locally. Up until this year, everything we built was at $25,000 or above, and mostly we were selling in the $70,000 to $90,000 range, and offering some financing, buyer financing options associated with that. This year we introduced a $10,000 model in Sierra Leone. We expanded to Sierra Leone this year and are looking at further regional expansion later this year and into next year. And we've learned a lot since 2014 about building in general. Our construction is fairly traditional in the sense that we are pouring a concrete slab and building cement masonry walls on top of that slab and stucco over those walls. So a lot of cement. We look for ways to reduce cement usage from trying to be attentive to our carbon footprint. Some of that reduction we get by introducing some precast components. Some of it we get by better managing the concrete mixture depending on what part of the building we're in. We found a tendency in some of the contractors that we work with there, and the subcontractors will sometimes over-engineer certain parts of the build and use more cement than they need to, and so there's a little training we need to do around that. With the $10,000 house in Sierra Leone, we're using in certain parts of that house using wood instead of reinforced concrete for certain parts of it. which is it'll be interesting to sort of hear what Wolf is doing with wood, because whether you're talking about introducing precast into a market that's used to concrete that's poured in place, or whether you're talking about introducing wood into a market where cement masonry construction is sort of what the cultural preference is. There's a conversation to be had with the end user, who for us is the buyer. If you're in the rental market, your buyer is not necessarily your end user, but you still have this push and pull between what you can accomplish with an introduction of a new process and what the market expects, and how you kind of bridge that gap. But we've had good uptake initially on this $10,000 home, which we offer. That's $10,000 is sort of the starting point, and then we have an upgraded version for 15 and a larger version for 22. And we're finding interest both with local buyers and with diasporans who look at this as a way to either get an affordable sort of pied-à-terre back in their home country, or as a way to house family members there. But we've got a lot of interesting questions to bounce back and forth between each other. So I'm going to stop there and hand it off to you, Wolf.
Thanks, Robert. Very interesting to hear, and pleasure to be here with you as very experienced panelists. I'm relatively new to the affordable housing scene, so it's a pleasure to discuss the topic with you guys and see what we can kind of come up with. So my name is Wolf. I'm the founder of Easy Housing, founded it 2 years ago. And I actually just moved to Mozambique to build a pilot project in Barra together with some of our partners, amongst which is Empower, who took part of the previous panel, which was also a very interesting discussion. But just to introduce Easy Housing first, we are a circular and climate smart building technology based on sustainably sourced timber. And we focus on emerging economies and provide the building blueprints and the sustainable timber building packages to our building partners. So we work through a partnership model, and we try to engage building partners throughout the value chain to basically allow them to adopt sustainable building technology as an alternative to concrete, which is of course used a lot and also has a lot of benefits, but considering its environmental footprint, we try to create an alternative which can replace concrete in a lot of housing typologies, actually. So we've made a scalable building system which allows for many floor plans and designs and housing typologies up to 2 or 3 stories. And it can also be tailored to local cultural contexts and local available sustainable timber. And through this partnership model, we actually stimulate the local building value chain, and we enhance the partners that already operate in the markets. So it's all about collaboration in that sense, and trying to connect the existing building infrastructure to adopt and embrace sustainable building materials as at least as a part of their construction projects. And the nice thing about timber construction is that in the way we have developed our system, it allows for both on-site construction as well as prefab construction. So you can actually assemble the timber frames in a carpentry workshop and then transport it to site, which makes it faster and scalable. But it also allows for on-site in case the project requires that. So in essence, the timber building package replaces effectively the use of concrete bricks. And because timber, if you source it from sustainable forestry, it actually acts as a carbon bank. The tree grows the timber and it stores the CO2 from the atmosphere in its construction. And as long as you make sure that the timber you use is from sustainably managed forests that are replanted and properly forested, you actually create a carbon sink, and you store the carbon that's being grown by the trees, and you store it in the construction for over 100 years at least. So this way we can reduce actually 260% of CO2 compared to concrete homes. And I think it's quite a controversial topic, because most of us here are very much used to building on concrete, and of course it has many benefits, and we will still use a lot of concrete in the decades to come. But I'm convinced that that timber construction will see an uplift, and you can actually see that trend happening in a lot of markets already. And I think especially now with the climate conference, the COP26 taking place in Glasgow, the awareness is increasing that the cement industry is accounting for 8% of global CO2 emissions, and also like construction in general is the construction industry is accounting for 10% of global CO2 emissions, 35% of waste, and 50% of mineral extraction. So it's very clear that we have to also make large transitions, while at the same time we have to tackle these huge housing deficits, which we also face, especially in the global south. But I'm running ahead of the topic. I think just to wrap up what we do with Easy Housing, here in Mozambique, in Barra, we are going to construct a pilot project in the coming weeks, together with our partners Casa Real and Empower. Empower took care of the funding of the project, and Casa Real is the implementing part. They are the project developer that's doing the construction. So it will be very interesting to see in the coming weeks how the concept works in practice, to see the cultural acceptance and the cost effectiveness. So obviously, building in timber, it's more expensive than building in concrete. So the starter homes we have are around $12,000 for a 35 square meter starter home. So it's in range of the alternatives, but it's still more expensive. But I'm sure that when the carbon markets and the true cost of housing technologies will be implemented in the coming years, we'll see that affordability of sustainable housing will also be stimulated hopefully through policy and market mechanisms that are being developed as we speak. So let me wrap it up there. You're on mute, Winnie.
Winnie, you're muted.
Actually, I was saying I feel attacked because we mentioned a lot about concrete, but you're saying that it is affordable. You will need to convince me actually that you can deliver an affordable housing using your wood, because my market, what we are saying is actually you need something that is doable, something that is practical, and you're not going to tell a Kenyan not to cut a tree because that tree is better than building something. You have to actually have data and deliver something that is applicable to my market. Why am I saying so? Regardless of the fact that I'm using concrete, that is without saying, our concrete panels are 2 inches thick. That's small. So it is 2 inches thick, and that saves a lot of space in a market where space is everything. Because we deal with single rooms, studio houses or bed sitters, 1-bedroom house or 2-bedroom houses, our panels are reusable. Our houses are dismantleable. And our panels, you can also use them as floor pavings. So there are multiple things that we can use our panels for. We don't just discard them. The other thing is that we are trying to work with BuildX to make sure that our panels we are incorporating green buildings. So we are doing things with plastic, mixing them with concrete. We are doing them mixing with wood chips. We are doing a lot of things, and also finding out that affordable housing is large. So we are also insulating. You're finding that the current use of insulation or ceilings are quite expensive. They kind of push things over the board. So you find like people are using plywood. We are working with sisal. We are working with bamboo, anything to provide insulation, but still maintain the quality of decency as well as affordability. So if you're going to tell me wood is better, can you give me something that I can apply?
Yeah, that's a good remark, Winnie. And let me stress that, of course, concrete construction is still a very important part of the solution towards affordable housing in the coming decades. So it also strongly depends on the market segment, as well as the local context. For example, Kenya doesn't have so much forestry, so there it's much more difficult to have timber construction as an affordable alternative to concrete construction. So it's all about local context as well. But of course, when you look at the aspects of building in timber, there is a lot of experience in timber construction across the world. Hundreds of millions of people actually live in timber structures, and if you engineer and build them properly, then they have the same qualities as any type of house, or even they can perform better in terms of living comfort to a certain extent. But besides that, I think when you look at the climate impact of construction, that's where we have to shift and have to focus on bio-based materials as and it doesn't have to be the entire construction, but for example, the paneling can be plywood instead of gypsum, which already makes a big difference. And I think there's a lot of attention going towards circular and bio-based construction. And one of the advantages of using bio-based materials is that it also allows for quick construction, as well as reuse and relocation of the homes. So actually, if you have a circular concept, you can dismantle the elements. Actually, just like you mentioned, your own concept allows for that, which also allows for incremental building, which is a topic we'll also touch upon later. So yeah, it's all about the context as well. And I think with also the cost of carbon markets going up, I think you also see that concrete will become more expensive in the coming decades, just because of the CO2 emissions it causes. So in any case, every construction company in the coming decade will face this sort of trade-off or dilemma. How much concrete can I use? How much will it cost? What regulations come into play to also force the transition towards bio-based materials? And I think that also has to somehow come into the big picture of affordable housing in global context, which is, of course, I want to say a multitude of problems coming together at once. So yeah, I don't have the answer as easy housing alone, but I think that's also why we're looking for partnerships across the value chain and across markets to see how we can work towards that.
I think that's great. Somebody in the chat was excited to see that this panel was heading into debate mode and not just having a bunch of talking heads. So look, I think this market is such an interesting market, and there's so many different ways to tackle the problem, and it draws in people who have really interesting ideas and who see problems that need to be solved and different ways of doing things. So it's inevitable that some of us are going to look at what other people are doing and scratch our heads and think, wait a minute, how is that fixing the problem that I'm fixing in a completely different way? But fundamentally, what we really all need to be doing is continuing to talk to each other and learn from each other, because the answer is ultimately going to be some sort of blend of solutions that comes from people that have seen different ways to attack the problem and are finding ways to put them together. Femi, I wanted to get your take on something. One of the things that we as a developer struggle with, and in the previous panel pointed out that really in the whole value chain, it's the developer that has to deal with most of the risk and most of the costs, and that's where really all the key pain points are in delivering affordable housing. One of the things that we've bumped up against as we try to roll out lower cost models is that you can change the size of the house, you can change the materials that you use, you can change the design. And there are levers that you can pull to make to get from a $50,000 house to a $10,000 house. But it doesn't selling a $10,000 house house isn't 20% as hard as selling a $50,000 house, right? You still have to have a sales and marketing operation that can speak to someone for whom this is probably the biggest purchase they've ever made, whether it's at $10,000 or $100,000. You still have to be able to have that conversation with them and help them understand that this is really going to be an answer to something, to a really important gap that they're trying to fill in their lives. And so I'm curious to hear your take on how you are handling this in Nigeria, kind of on the one hand, bridging this gap between the dreams that people have and the budget that they can actually afford, on the one hand, and then on the other hand, this is Wolf sort of alluded to this, finding ways to get something to people now that they need and can afford, but also building it in a way that opens the door to incremental additions to that, so that they can sort of build toward a dream.
Okay, no, that's excellent, Robert. I don't know that we have found the answer, but I think at the front, we're on a learning curve, and I think we've had our fingers burnt. We're doing things perhaps differently, and so far seems to be working. So 2 years ago, when we started, we participated and sponsored the development, which aimed to provide homes at just about $5,000. So they were very small homes. They were functional, but perhaps slightly removed from the dreams and aspiration of the target market. And therefore, we ran into a very significant challenge with actually selling those houses. But when we looked into it, we found out that the house was an issue, but actually what we had created was made the dream so far away from the potential buyers because of the location of the project. We found that people were quite happy to accept a trade-off of smaller homes, perhaps lower specifications, which offered prospects for improvement or enlargement if the location of the homes was a place that they wanted to live in, i.e. it was near public transport, it was near facilities, it was near education, it was near where their families were. And that informed what has now become a very central part of the projects that the Family Homes Funds participate in the sense that the absolutely critical element is the location of the site. I think we do have an unusual advantage in the sense that all of the sites, the Family Homes Funds operates on a partnership with government. And part of the deal of that partnership is that government, whether local or central government, provides the land for those projects. So part of our insistence is the fact that those sites are provided in locations which are central and therefore are attractive to people on low income. And so now on the back of that decision, we have, as I said, about 15,000 homes at different stages of completion, many of them occupied, but very similar houses to the first one, which was not sold. These ones are having very significant increases in interest because the locations are good. People accept the locations. We're investing in infrastructure, we're investing in landscaping, and people are happy to accept the trade-off that they can do something about their own houses. They can make it bigger. They can adjust it to fit their own taste. but they're doing that within the context of an environment that they like, where they like to live. And that really has been our way around essentially bringing the dream closer and within reach of people on low income. But look, as I said, it's a learning curve. You always learn in this business, but that is where we are. So far, it looks to be working, but we keep watching. Thanks, Robert.
No, thank you. That's you touch on such an important piece of this, because this land question, one of the first questions we get when we sell houses, when we talk to new prospects, is, well, does it include the land? Because part of that question is, how much more, how much am I really going to have to pay? And part of that question is often, well, I already bought land. Can you build on my land, right? And we typically don't do that for a few different reasons. But also when you talk about public sector land being made available for development of low-cost housing, one of the challenges that we encounter is that there's a gap in a sense between the land that public sector actors are ready to make available. Like, where that land tends to be isn't always, or even often, where the people who need that housing want to live. And if you're making land available that's 300 kilometers away from the urban center, well, if you have a large mining project or agriculture project or some sort of industrial activity that can support employment in a community, and you can wrap schools and health clinics and all sorts of things around that development, that's one thing. But if you don't have that, and you're just putting a bunch of houses far away from any sort of employment opportunity, it's not really solving the problem.
No, absolutely, Rob. I think what we found is it's so easy to build in the distant suburbs of our bigger cities. Actually, when you look at the numbers, you're doing people on low income a lot of disservice. You are basically economically disempowering them. I mean, we worked that in Abuja, for example. That if you put people far out of the center of town, in transport cost into work alone is significantly more than their housing costs. Okay, so you're actually impoverishing them, and that is something that I think we all shouldn't be doing. But you're absolutely right. I don't think that any public sector land in a good location will be on the table for the asking. And I think that a big part of what we all have to do in this sector and this segment of the market is reaching a huge investment in partnerships, but more significantly, a huge investment in education and advocacy. So again, let me just give an example. We found that a lot of the people on low income that we house who are living, a lot of people on low income who are living on the edge of the city, say in Abuja, for example, can't afford to come to work every day because the cost of transport exceeds their salary. So they do a deal with their line managers to turn up for work a couple of days a week, or maybe once a week, because they just don't earn enough to pay for the fare to come into work. Is not worth it. And so government is actually paying the cost of this in terms of the effectiveness of that workforce. So I think that some of this information is not out there about putting people in a place where it's expensive for them to get into work, to access economic and social facilities. Actually has a cost. It has a cost on society. And I think that we've been fortunate so far, partly because of the structure of the ownership of the fund, to get that message across, and therefore have a fairly significant land bank in very central locations. So I think that it's possible. It's not going to be done, it's not on the table for the asking. I think that it's a real battle, but I think it's a battle that is is worth fighting for, to ensure that people on low income can live in the center of our cities and enjoy access to economic and social opportunities.
It's so true.
Could I supplement on that? Because I'm very happy to bring up this point, because I think in many affordable housing projects, the urbanism is sort of pushed out of the equation, like both on the grander urban scale that you mentioned in terms of cost of commuting and traveling infrastructure, but also in the neighborhoods themselves. It's so important that, especially also in affordable neighborhoods, that that project developers and municipalities or local governments work together to create a good urban plan for the neighborhoods, and also to allow for mixed use, to allow for mixed income groups, and to create also all sorts of local economic activities to really enforce that or foster the sense of community that you need for a new neighborhood to also become sustainable in the long term as a community. I think that's something that's often being neglected in affordable housing projects, and that's really a risk, because that also often implies that the lifespan of that neighborhood is not as long or as good as it could be. So it's a very good point.
Yeah. So listen, we've only got 3 minutes left. I'm going to surprise you all with a question that we didn't talk about before, which is a question that we think about internally a lot as we try to move into the lower price point. When we build a $100,000 house or $150,000 house or an $80,000 house, we are building in a way that we think should make that house last 100 years. If it's well maintained, if people pay attention to it. If you're building a $10,000 house, or let's say whichever side of $10,000 you're on, but let's say when you're really focusing on the super affordable end of the market, should we be building 100-year houses, 50-year houses, 20-year houses? What's your take on that? And I'll start with Winnie, and then just let the rest of you take a shot at that.
I don't know if I can answer that question properly. I use concrete, so I expect it to live longer. The one that rots, maybe you can ask Wolf, because I'm thinking what we are looking at is something that we are working with. And one of the things that COVID actually brought out is the fact that some people actually downgrade. And most of the people in an African culture, you live more than one family in a house. So you find that people took their children to their grandmothers or something, and they downgraded and shared the house. COVID is not going to be with us for long. So I imagine the society is dynamic. We will just move as it comes. The current situation works for now. I think also with people looking at green buildings and things like that, technology is going to evolve. What might be prudent to do is actually use different technologies in the same structure. If it is block house, we use precast, we use what are they called, fire bricks or stabilized blocks. We use them in the same building. That way we are actually, shall we say, we are using all technologies in different markets just to make things affordable so that they can stay longer. And we are saying that there's no technology that will get a cake simply because the time has passed. If we just accept and use different of them, then they're going to last longer, just not one technology. That's my thought process.
Look, I think we've got to keep an open mind. I don't know about 100 years. That's way too far out for me to even contemplate. But I think the principle has to be that we need to kind of put some roots down. Increasingly, I think housing and housing finance will become intergenerational. And therefore, it's important that those assets are in good nick, and therefore can kind of walk through generations and help to create wealth. So it's not just housing in itself, but housing as part of the economic health and economic future of a family and their generation. So yes, if the technology is there and it doesn't undermine issues around affordability, my view is why not?
Sounds good. Listen, we are at time. Keisha's here, and I think
We have a bit of a technical issue that I just wanted to ask you about. I have Richard here from Haggai Mortgage Finance, and he wanted to ask a question, but we don't quite know how to work the back end and the front end. So, Richard, can I ask you to just come here and you can ask the question directly? He's trying. There we go. Here you go.
I can go ahead.
There, yeah.
Okay, you're muted.
you're on mute now, Keisha. You're on mute. Mute.
I'll remove the mask.
Do it over again. There we go.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Yep.
Okay, now, number one is this. The allocation, this project is called social housing provision. In social housing provision, I think the essence of it is for the end users, who are the people and the low income and all those things, to have the house at the end of the day. So in the case of allocation of lands by government, I want to strictly say that where those lands are not accessible, where those lands are not accessible to the people, you should not accept it and have any development on those type of land. Because there's no essence of taking a land from people, putting developers there to build houses there. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, nobody is taking it, no off-taker. Then what's the essence of providing the house? You understand? So the first place is that if the government is not ready to give land where the road network is good, don't take the land. Because you end up building houses there. At the end of the day, nobody is taking the house. The houses are there. You can call it 50,000, you can call it 500,000, but no human being is living there. So at the end of the day, it's just a waste. The second point is that, you see, the designs of those houses, and especially the work of the developers, have to be taken care of. Where a developer is not good, don't engage in. And you see, because every one of us, some of us are into development as well. How do you discover a good developer? When you give a house to a developer and he's going to build, the first 3 square meters of his work will show if he's going to deliver good works to you or not. So at the beginning, if he's not delivering and the thing is not precise, you stop him. Somebody else can be engaged to do the work. Because if those properties are developed, those houses, and their finishing is not good, it is certain for sure that there will be no off-taker at the end of the day. So the most property will just be there. The last one I want to talk about is the fact that, you see, the last one I want to talk about is that, you see, once the designs of those houses can also change from the region of the land, because see, what is applicable to people in the east is not applicable to people, is not acceptable to people in the west, is not acceptable to the people in the south. So we can manage the designs and yet at the same cost, and yet to be acceptable to the people. That is my own concept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
We didn't hear you.
Okay, did you heard that question?
I did not hear.
Respond to the question.
I don't think it was a question. I think it was a comment, or will I call it pastoral advice?
If it was a question, I think the answer is yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. We've sort of, are there any responses that you want, any comments that you want to make on that? We are at the end of our time. There's a lag between the live version and this, and we didn't quite know how to manage it. So thank you very much for receiving this comment that came from the live room. And you've been responding so well to the comments that have been going through the chat. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and Wolf, Winnie, Femi, it's been a treat having this conversation with you, and I look forward to continuing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Likewise.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, nice to meet you guys. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.